So today we're going to talk about why you should toy around with your game idea before you commit into making it an actual full commercial game, right? And I'm going to kick this off by asking you this very important question. Have you ever wanted to make a game quickly, more efficient, fun, fast, right? I genuinely believe from experience and by helping others that the roadmap method is the answer to making games quickly. And the reason why is because all it is a simple list of every single task you have to do in order to make the game launchable. This is the fastest way if you respect deadlines, if you stop iterating, if you just accept the boring work, and you have to assume that you're making the right roadmap, right? So if we know that the roadmap method, which again, list of instructions to make a game, is the fastest way to do it, there's going to be some problems with that, right? And I just kind of described some of them here, but more importantly, you need to recognize what your game is going to look like when you're about to publish it. Meaning, it's not you grab your game idea and then iterate 100 times until you have something fun. It's actually the opposite. It's, oh, my game should look like this. Therefore, I'm going to base every single instruction based off of what it would finally look like. That requires reverse engineering. That requires a lot of experience with knowing game design, what works, what doesn't work. And the biggest problem or the biggest question is, how do you even know how to make a game backwards, right? When you don't even know what game you're making in the first place, right? Like, how can I make a roadmap on a concept that's not even, solid or fundamental, right? And this is where I say, well, you need to playground your game. You need to basically play around, toy around, mess around with an idea, a mechanic, something, so that it's so strong and you say, wow, this is really engaging. Oh, this is really fun. Can I make an entire game out of the premise that I just created? And we're going to talk about that in a second. But when we talk about playing around your game engine and everything, right? One huge common problem that developers have is that we kind of just open, and I'm guilty of this, right? But we open our game engines, we toy around, we have this really cool idea, and then we add more, then we take less, then we do this, then we iterate. And before you know it, like 2 years have passed by and you didn't make a game. You're just literally, tinkering around with your engine. So how do we not only escape that, but like become efficient to the point where we're proactively creating things that actually matter that can lead to a full game, right? And I'm going to tell you that the secret is you have to toy around until you have one idea. Doesn't matter if it's a good idea, doesn't matter if it's a bad idea, doesn't matter if it's high quality, low quality, just establish one main idea. Not two or more, one, okay? This is like the most important part. The reason why I say this is because I want you to pay very close attention to the big picture, okay? You have one idea. You're going to make an entire game based off of that, which means that core idea is going to have a lot of supporting systems and features to support it. For example, let's talk about dodging, right? If my game's premise or mechanic or, concept is about dodging, then every single system I make with it has to support just the dodging part, nothing else, okay? If I do more than one, I already messed up. I'm always going to focus on, again, one core idea. So I have dodging. Okay, what are my supporting systems? Okay, maybe I need a health system. Maybe I need an attacking system. Maybe I, make systems and features that only support the reason why you have the core idea in the first place. And then once you have that list ready, you say, you know what? I'm going to start writing all the things that I need to actually make this game launchable. Meaning my game probably needs a settings menu. It probably needs the ability to tweak its volume. It probably needs one or two levels. It needs a couple of bosses, just make an entire game. And here's the beautiful part, right? You might be thinking, wait, hold on. We didn't iterate, right? Like, how do we know if this is a good idea or bad? That's the beautiful part. You don't have to know that. Meaning, let's say you made your entire game and at the end of the day, it was cheeks. It sucked. Then guess what? You rinse and repeat and you just do it again. I'm telling you this because you can always iterate on one game to make it better. But when you iterate from game to game, you're gaining more experience as a developer rather than what's happening in one game. And I want to break this down by giving you this example that I had, right? Where my first game was Dodge King, right? And little fun fact, right? It was cheeks. It was bad. It was terrible. Okay. I focused on dodging. I focused on that. That was like the main premise and mechanic. But I realized like I didn't add bosses. It had a very sloppy UI. It was like a bad game. But it's the fact that I had the mechanic and all of the supporting systems to the point where I actually launched it and it has its own Steam page so you can actually go and buy the game, right? And I realized, okay, I launched the game. Now I know the entire process of what it's like to actually build and launch a game. So I could have spent years perfecting Dodge King, but I just decided to actually launch it, get the feedback that I needed, and realized, okay, with what I currently have that works, what can I do to improve? And so the next project that I did was a mini version of Dodge King. In other words, Dodge King as if it were mini games that I can add to another game. And what happened was this time, the main idea or the main like playground mechanic I was focusing on was movement. And so this time I realized, the movement feels better because now I focused just on movement, but I still have all of the main dodging mechanics from my last game because I'm recycling that into this one. And so what happened? I ended up putting it in the next game. It felt really good movement wise, and I realized, I improved not only the mechanic, but the entire premise of just making a game, right? Let me be very clear when I say this. Iterating on a game on its own has its merit. It's good. It allows you to make a better game. But iterating from one game to another allows you to see how everything works. And we're talking about all the systems, how audio works, visuals, polishing. You're talking about the bigger picture of how games are made. So after I did this mini game, I realized, okay, hold on. I have a working dodging system. I have a working movement system. What if I remade Dodge King again from scratch? But this time I'm going to focus on upgrades. So when I went back to the playground, again, toying around with my engine just to mess with things, all I was focusing on was what makes an upgrade system feel good, what's engaging, how does that work, could I polish it later? And I basically made an entire game, again, called Dodge King Deluxe, now on Steam, where you can literally play the game and it has all of the previously featured mechanics in this one. And now in my current game, I'm focusing on capturing. But if you notice, I could have just continued iterating on Dodge King over and over and over and over again. But no, I'm just iterating by game. So now in my new game, I actually already have the dodging, the movement, and the upgrade systems from my other games, and now it's just layering onto what I currently have. I'm explaining this to you because when you realize that everything is a snowball effect from game to game, you literally become a better game developer because you're paying attention to every single aspect of games, not just the mechanics, not just how it feels, how it looks, the whole thing, the launching process, the production, how quick you are, how slow you are, how you enable tasks, how you respect your deadlines, how you end up assessing the development process, right? So the more you do this, the more you practice that, the faster you become. And then road mapping becomes easier, right? So, and again, you might have the argument of like, no, my game has to be perfect on this first try, this and that. Brother, let me tell you, I made my game twice from scratch and nobody noticed. You know what I mean? Like there's no rules if you're making a good or a bad game. The whole point is you just have to make games, all right? So, if I wasn't clear enough, all I'm trying to say is that you get the snowball effect by you making games and launching over and over and over and over because you're focusing on the bigger picture. Yeah, you're making better games, you're making better mechanics, better this, better concepts, but you're also focusing on the production side, on how you, the developer, behaves, how quickly you're able to respect your deadlines, how you follow instructions, how you plan, how you do and launch an entire project. Okay? Now, that being said, when you do make a game, there's always going to be these four phases you have to pay attention to. So the first one is called the playground phase, which is the whole concept that we're going to talk about, which is how do we create an idea that's like fun enough that we can make this its entire game, right? The second part is the prototype phase, which is just literally make your entire game ugly and just like make it work. The polish phase is like, okay, now we're going to focus on the art, the visuals, making the characters flex on the actual systems. And then post-launch, which is like, hey, we launched a game, and now we're just going to kind of fix and patch a couple of things according to the feedback that our players have been giving us, right? And the crazy part about all this is that I would argue that the playground phase needs to be 5 to 10% of the entire development, meaning it's going to be short, it's going to be sweet, it's going to be messy, but it's not going to be the main focus of the entire development. It's just you picking up one core idea and saying, I'm going to commit to this so that I can make everything else launchable. Now, I must reiterate one more time. You cannot stay in this phase forever because if you do, you're just not going to launch a game. So I made another video called Escape Your Playground, which is talking about how you can enter the playground method, how you can build your playground, and then how you can leave so that you can become an effective developer, right? So more on that later. But why is playground so critical? Why is this so important? And again, I'm trying to explain to you that if you just launched a game every single, I don't know, year, right? Imagine where you would be at 50 years from now, right? The actual quality of the game that you're building would just naturally be better because, again, every single aspect you're working on just evolves with your skill. The other thing is you're always going to get this advice online specifically where it's like, oh, just make a small game, right? And the reason why that's such a popular advice is because it's not about the game itself, it's about the entire process. If you can learn how to make a small game, then you basically know how to do the entire process of the game. What happens is over time and with experience, you will be capable of dealing with higher level skills. Therefore, you'll be able to make bigger, better games, games with bigger scopes, games with more complexity. And then it just becomes natural because you are developing your skill set as a developer. And then the other part is in the playground time, meaning like the time you actually use to experiment and play around and toy around with all these like concepts and ideas. This is where you learn the tools, the tricks, the techniques of like the actual technical part of game development. And once you reach a plateau or once you kind of like understand what's needed to be done, prototyping, building, polishing, doing all the other things to actually launch a game is literally second nature. It's just like, oh, well, if I'm going to make a racing game, for example, then I need to learn how to make cars move. Oh, I already learned how to do that. Now all I got to do is just make systems that support that. And guess what? Now I can launch a game that, has cars that move. Basically, that's the entire conversation. Now, the last part that's really important is we need to practice how to work in small sessions. If I told you, hey, in your playground phase, spend a year toying around, well, now you're in trouble because you're spending a whole year with ideas that simply just don't make it, right? I would tell you, hey, spend 2 weeks, a month, like a short amount of time building something that could have a committable idea. The reason why this is important is because when you have the ability to pull away from engaging activities, then you have the strength to do self denial. What I'm trying to say is, let's say you're watching, this is crazy, right? But let's say you're watching a movie. The movie is 2 hours long, right? You probably want to watch the entire movie. That's the whole point, right? But if I told you, oh, at the half hour mark, walk away from the movie, that's really hard to do. Like, you're probably invested. You probably want to see the ending. It's a really weird concept. But all I'm saying is, if you have the ability to get up and walk away, then you're actually proving your ability to have self denial. Why is self denial so important? Because self denial is a requirement that you need when you're following a roadmap or a deadline. You see, the thing about this is that road mapping and deadlines is a really boring concept. It requires you to like dismiss your creativity, dismiss the will of you iterating. It makes you say, okay, I'm not here for the creative. I'm actually here to do the job part of game development. That means I'm going to have to write systems that are probably boring. That means I probably have to write systems that I'm not comfortable writing. That means I have to get out of my comfort zone and just deal with the problems that I have to debug and fix and deal with all these issues. You probably don't want to do that because it's not fun, it's not rewarding, but it's required for you to launch your game. And so if you do this over and over and over and over again, you build tolerance, you build self-denial, and you become stronger to the point where you're following these instructions as more effectively as possible. And this is going to garner you a bunch of results, meaning you get to launch more games, you get to learn quicker, you get to gain more experience. And as you do that, you just, again, become a better game developer. So that being said, how do we actually properly playground, right? We're talking about the idea of, okay, it's important to have your core idea. It's important to make one idea, commit to it, and then do this entire roadmap process. But how do we actually effectively become a developer that can assess the playground phase good, right? Like, how does that work? There's 3 rules, all right? And number 1 is you have to set a time limit, meaning a deadline. I'm saying this because I preach this so super often. You need to use Parkinson's law, okay? Parkinson's law, in other words, is saying, hey, I have a deadline, which means if I say by Friday, X activity has to be done, that means I have Y amount of time to get it done. If I said instead of Friday, I have this Wednesday to do that same activity, you're going to do the exact same type of work, except instead of Friday, it's going to be for Wednesday. The trick about this is that the shorter your deadline is, the more work gets done in that time. And even if you don't really meet the deadline, the amount of progress you make is still insane. Like, you're still going to make way more progress than you would without a deadline. So always establish a deadline, always establish a time limit. Use Parkinson's law as often as possible for all phases, whether you're playgrounding, whether you're making your prototype, whether you're launching. For whatever project you do, you need to add a deadline no matter what. This is like the most critical thing, right? The second thing, and this is a very, very interesting point that I want to bring up here, is that when you're in the playground phase, your main goal is to make your mechanic, your premise, your concept, whatever you're building, feel like a toy. In other words, think about it like this. Games are toys. And I really want to shout out Indie Game Clinic here because he made a video called "These are the your game must do these 2 things," and he basically asks you 2 things: what do you do to build engagement, and what do you do to build appeal in your game? And he uses a comparison with toys that I think is absolutely genius because toys kind of really are like video games in the sense that they require engagement. They require you to like pick it up and have fun. They make you emulate an experience. They employ interactivity. They allow for player fantasy. All these are like very comparable things, right? The thing is that a toy is fun when you're engaging with it, and the appeal is like why you pick it up in the first place, right? And so the difference between a game and a toy is that toys have an inserted feel while games have a curated feel. And what that means is insert is like, hey, like if I'm gonna toy around with the actual physical toy, I have to kind of use my imagination on like what I'm doing with it. So if I'm like holding a plane and if I'm kind of like, driving it around in the air, I'm probably making sound effects. I'm probably thinking about characters. I'm probably doing like this like role play type of thing, right? Where games are the opposite in the sense that it is the experience that is created for the player to have fun with and everything. And so the secret about toys is that they always have just one mechanic. Again, going back to the whole core idea, you only need one mechanic to focus on. So, for example, if you look at Bop It, it's about quick time reaction. If you look at Legos, it's about building. If you look at any remote controlled car, it's about emulating speed. If you look at Play Doh, it's about art crafting. If you look at kites, it's about flying. If you look at action figures, it's about role playing. They all have one thing that they focus on, and everything else about it is just supporting that. So it could be the colors, it could be the appeal, it could be the characters, it could be what else you do, but it all focuses on one core idea. I'm saying this because games are no different. Pokemon is literally about trading. Every single interaction you do in Pokemon always comes down to trading. You are either fighting so that you're trading the battle experience to get money, and then you trade the money to get Pokeballs, and then you trade throwing the Pokeball to capture the monster, and then you capture the monster to do more fight. Like it's all about trading. With Mario, it's all about jumping. If you jump, you can reach coins. If you jump, you can dodge attacks. If you jump on enemies, you can attack them. If you jump and hit the power block, you get an upgrade. Have you ever noticed that the fire flower doesn't save you from gaps? It's because the main objective is to jump over the gap. Like everything about Super Mario is about jumping. And so, self plug here, but Dodge King, right? What is Dodge? Dodge King is about dodging. Therefore, every single mechanic and feature that I'm going to build for Dodge King must support the main idea, dodging. Okay? So, once again, when you're toying around and trying to figure out what game idea you want to make, what you're trying to build, what what is the key thing that you're making before you commit to it, your goal is to always make that mechanic feel like a toy. So in this, for example, in this example, it's a grid shooter. Okay, how do I make it feel like this is fun, this is great? It does this idea actually have enough potential for me to commit to it? And this is where I can iterate, honestly. Like if I realize maybe I need more time to cook, then I'll go ahead and do that. But once I know that this idea is set, it's good, I'm definitely going to triple down on it, then that's where I do the roadmap and then I just follow instructions until my game becomes launchable. So always keep your idea to a 1 degree objective, which means just focus on one core idea, no matter what. Everything else is going to support that. Just focus on one idea, no matter what. And again, as you write this, remember, do not stay in the playground phase. You want to get out of there as quickly as possible. Again, I kind of talked about this already, but like if you make an idea and just play around with it and just keep iterating and it's been years and you haven't launched the game, you're in trouble. You need to find a way to pull back and just start writing the actual commitment process of launching the game. And the last step is you have to keep it as bare bones as possible, because this is by you keeping it ugly and messy and like again really bare bones, you will have the ability to iterate much more quickly, because now you don't have to worry about the art, you don't have to worry about the sound effects, you don't have to worry about all these extra fluff things that simply just might get dismissed or cut content, right? So just focus on the things that actually matter, the main mechanics, how it feels, controls, and just go back and forth with it until you say, hey, I have the core concept here, this is good. So, for example, the first one is the grid shooter. The next one is dodging. This one is about capturing. And so, if you have it to the point where it feels like a toy, it's like, oh, this is fun, this is great, then guess what? Now you can commit. And once you're able to commit, you write the roadmap and you run with it. And this is the process you use to make games quickly. So, because I said a lot, let's do this quick recap, okay? Number one, roadmaps, if you respect it correctly, meaning you follow the deadline, you actually do the instructions that you wrote out, and you actually made a correct roadmap of like, hey, you have all the things that you actually need to launch your game, will be the fastest way to make any game. All right. To know how to make a roadmap, you need to have an idea first. And so this is where you play around. This is why you playground. This is why you play around with your game idea until you have something that you say, this is committable. Always keep that one idea as a 1 degree objective, meaning it's just one core concept, never two, never three, never four, just one. If it's about dodging, it's about dodging. If it's about shooting, it's about shooting. If it's about jumping, it's about jumping. Never anything more. All right. And the reason why we talk about keeping one thing at a time is because you iterate from game to game, not from the actual game itself, but every time you do game to game, you are learning all the procedures and all the aspects of making and launching a game. The more times you do that, the more experience you have, and that's going to allow you to make more games better, faster, more efficiently, but you just learn how to launch at a better pace. Establish a time limit so that you can limit yourself on how much time you actually have to make the idea. And once your idea feels like a toy, then you write the roadmap, commit to it, and then launch your game. You follow that process. So this is what's called playground in your game. Literally just follow these steps and you should be fine. And just a quick recommendation, if you guys like this type of content, I have a bunch of other videos that deal with this. And please check out Indie Game Clinic. This video in particular is a must watch. It is super mind blowing. And yeah, I hope this video helps.